Welcome to Heart Over Gold, the channel where love, kindness, and humanity shine brighter than any fortune. In today's story, Johnny Trent, a powerful real estate magnate, shattered his life and his wife Jessica Quintana's heart when he left her for a younger mistress, Valeria Frio. Believing he was in control, Johnny soon learned that the only thing more dangerous than a woman scorned is one who discovers her strength. Jessica, pregnant and betrayed, rebuilt her life with Johnny's bitter rival, Cassian Lobo. As Johnny's obsession grew, he waged a brutal war for custody of their unborn child, but Jessica's resilience proved stronger. This is a story of ultimate betrayal, fierce redemption, and the explosive consequences when a man loses everything he thought he controlled. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments, and keep up with our latest stories. Johnny Trent's arrogance had cost him dearly. Once a formidable real estate magnate, his life, as well as his wife's heart, shattered when he left her for a younger, more dazzling mistress. He thought he'd come out on top, in control of everything. But soon, he would be hit with a harsh reality. The only thing more perilous than a woman scorned is one who discovers her own strength. Jessica, though wounded, not only endured, but began to rebuild her life with none other than Drugel's biggest rival. As she grew stronger, his perfect icy exterior began to crack, and he was consumed by an obsession that threatened to undo everything he still had. This is a tale of ultimate betrayal, a woman's fierce fight for redemption, and the explosive repercussions when a powerful man finally realizes he has lost it all. The silence in Drugel's penthouse on Madrid's Pio de la Castellana felt almost alive. It suffocated her. Once, Jessica had admired the air conditioning system's sterile precision. Now it felt stifling. She leaned against the grand windows, gazing out at the sprawling greenery of Retiro Park, feeling as though she were a million miles away from everything she once knew. This silence had become her constant companion over the last 3 weeks, more present than Drugel himself. At 34, Johnny Trent was a titan in the industry, a man who didn't just enter a room, he dominated it. His face, sharply sculpted, was a mask of cold calculation, gracing the covers of business magazines with ease. He moved like a predator, never hearing the word no. The moment his icy blue eyes first fell on Jessica Quintana, a quiet art historian with a passion for dusty books and the play of light in paintings, she felt as though she were the only woman in the world. His pursuit at first felt like devotion, but once they married, once she signed the prenuptial agreement his lawyers had assured her was nothing more than a formality, she learned the truth. She was not loved, she was acquired. Now, at 28, Jessica was pregnant with their first child. Her hope was that the pregnancy might bridge the widening gap between them, but that hope had been dashed. The emptiness between them had grown deeper, filled with his constant absences and coldness in their shared bed that no amount of heating could explain away. Drugel entered the living room, his Italian-made shoes silent against the polished marble floors. He had showered and changed, swapping his suit for a cashmere sweater that likely cost more than her first car. He didn't acknowledge her as he moved toward the wine fridge, selecting a bottle of sparkling water. His voice was cool, impersonal, like a man closing a business deal. "We need to talk, Jessica." Jessica's hand instinctively went to her stomach, still flat. A sharp pang of dread twisted in her chest. "I tried to talk to you last night, Drugel," she said, her voice trembling. "You came in after I'd fallen asleep." "I was busy," he replied, twisting the cap off the water bottle with an abrupt snap. "This isn't working," he said, his words hanging in the air, simple and devastating. Jessica's heart raced. What isn't working?" "The schedule." Her mind scrambled, trying to process his words. "I can adjust. We could—" He turned to face her then. His cobalt blue eyes were devoid of emotion. There was no anger, no sadness, only a chilling emptiness. "This marriage has reached its end." Jessica's breath left her in a jagged gasp. "What are you talking about, Drugel?" "I'm pregnant." He didn't react. "I'm aware," he said nonchalantly, taking a sip from the bottle. "Arrangements will be made. The child will be well cared for. You too, obviously. I'm not a monster." The casual cruelty in his words was more painful than if he had shouted at her. He was discarding her like a failed investment. "A monster?" Jessica whispered, her voice cracking. "You're talking about our baby, our marriage, as if they were just business transactions. Line items on a balance sheet." Drugel's face twitched, a flicker of annoyance flashing across it for the first time. "There's someone else," he said. "Her name is Valeria Frio, and yes, it's serious." The name hit Jessica like a punch to the gut. Valeria Frio, an Instagram model and socialite, only 24, who Jessica had seen often at charity galas Drugel attended alone. Jessica had always convinced herself that it meant nothing, but now it was clear. To Drugel, it had been everything. So that's it? Jessica stood up, her legs unsteady beneath her. You bring this woman into our lives, and I'm just supposed to disappear with your child inside me? I would prefer no drama, Drugel said, his voice dropping to a cold, final warning. My lawyers will be in touch tomorrow. They've drafted a generous severance package. Consider it a bonus for your time at the company. Severance package. The words felt like a slap to her face. She was no longer his wife. She was a discarded employee. A severance package? Jessica repeated, a hysterical laugh rising in her throat. You think this is about a job? Drugel stared at her, unblinking. You were my wife. The position is no longer available. He set the water bottle down with a dry click, as if to punctuate the end of their relationship. I've arranged for you to stay at the Ritz until you find something more permanent. Valeria will be moving in this weekend. It's best if you're gone by tomorrow night. The power imbalance between them was staggering. Drugel held all the cards, the money, the lawyers, the house. He had meticulously isolated her from her life and friends until everything revolved around him, and now he was evicting her from it all. No, Jessica said, her voice firm with an unexpected strength. Drugel raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by her defiance. I won't discuss my life, or my child's life, with your lawyers. I won't be packed up like last season's luggage. You want a divorce, Drugel? You'll have to go through me, not your legal department. For the first time, a flicker of genuine surprise crossed his face. He had expected her to crumble, to beg, but instead, she was standing her ground. Very well, Jessica, he said, his voice soft but threatening. But understand this. When I want something, I get it. And when I want something to disappear, it disappears. With that, he turned and walked out, leaving her alone in the cavernous, cold silence of their home. She felt a chill seep into her very bones as his words echoed in her mind. This wasn't just a divorce. It was a battle for her survival, for the only thing she had left, the baby inside her. The man was tall and lean with dark, thoughtful eyes and a shadow of a beard. He wore a well-cut but understated gray suit. There was a quiet intensity about him that was compelling. It is, she agreed, turning back to the photo. It's defiant. That's the word, he said. Most people see decay. You see defiance. He extended a hand. I'm Cassian Lobo. The name startled her. Cassian Lobo, the CEO of Lobo Deserolos. He was Madriel's most significant and bitter rival. They were polar opposites in the business world. Madriel was known for hostile takeovers and ruthless downsizing, while Lobo was known for sustainable projects and a reputation for integrity. Their feud was financial legend. Madriel despised him with a passion that bordered on the pathological. Jessica's guard went up instantly. Jessica Quintana, she said, her tone colder than she intended. Cassian's eyes widened in recognition. It wasn't her name he recognized, but her face. He had seen it in photos. On Madrigal Hale's arm, a ghost of a pained expression crossed his face. He knew who she was, and most likely what had happened. The gossip machine of the London elite was ruthlessly efficient. I'm sorry, he said, his voice soft with what sounded like genuine sympathy. For what it's worth, I've seen your work up close. No one deserves that. Jessica bristled. She didn't want his pity. I don't know what you're referring to. He didn't press. He simply nodded, his gaze returning to the photograph. Well, Miss Quintana, it was a pleasure to meet you. He gave her another small, respectful smile and walked away, leaving Jessica with a strange mix of suspicion and an unbidden flash of warmth. He hadn't been predatory or invasive. He had been kind. Do you think Cassie Lobo has an ulterior motive? Or is he truly an unexpected ally? Tell us in the comments. The obsession, meanwhile. Madrigal was finding that his life with Valeria was not the seamless upgrade he'd anticipated. The penthouse, once a silent sanctuary of his control, was now filled with the chaos of Valeria's world. Her vapid, loud friends were a constant presence. The quiet he craved was replaced by the incessant click of her phone camera, as she documented every moment of her new luxurious life for her followers. She was beautiful, she was exciting, and she was utterly infatuated with him. But he found her adoration cloying, her conversation shallow. He had won, but the prize felt empty. He had expected Jessica to crumble, to take the money and disappear, a footnote in his biography. Instead, his lawyers reported that she'd retained counsel. She was fighting back. He would see paparazzi photos of her looking pale and thin, but undeniably resolute walking into a lawyer's office. One night, a photo from a society blog popped up on his feed. It was from the gallery opening. A candid shot showed Jessica, her hand resting on her pregnant belly, talking to Cassie and Lobo. They weren't touching. They weren't even particularly close, but they were sharing a space. A moment, a nauseating, unfamiliar emotion twisted in Magical's stomach. It was hot. It was acidic. And it tasted like poison. It was jealousy. It was possession. How dare she? How dare he? She was still Mrs. Madrigal Hale. She was carrying his child. The sight of her in the same frame as his most hated rival was a personal, intolerable affront. He snatched his phone and called his head of security. I want to know everything about her new life. He snarled, his voice a low growl. Where does she go? Who does she see? Everything. And I want leverage on Lobo. Find it. I don't care what it costs. He had tried to erase her with indifference. Now he would erase her with his power. The game had changed. This was no longer about a quiet divorce. This was about total and utter destruction. The new life in the Latina neighborhood was a study in contrasts for Jessica. The loss of immense wealth was less jarring than the return of autonomy. She learned the rhythms of the subway, the names of the shopkeepers at the local market, the simple joy of buying a coffee without it being charged to a faceless corporate account. It was a smaller life, but it was profoundly and completely her own. The legal battle was a slow, grueling war of attrition. Madrigal's lawyers sent a flurry of motions, demanded exhaustive financial disclosures from her pre-marriage life, and tried to paint her as an unstable gold digger. Serena Cruz was a bulldog, countering every move with meticulous, unyielding professionalism. He's trying to wear you down emotionally, Serena told her during one grueling strategy session. Don't let him. Jessica's second encounter with Cassie and Lobo was as unexpected as the first. She was in a small independent bookstore running her hand along the spines of art history texts when he spoke her name. Jessica. She turned startled. He held a biography of architect Francisco Javier Candeoa. He looked less formal today in dark jeans and a simple, well-fitting shirt. Mr. Lobo Cassian, please. He insisted with a soft smile in his eyes. He gestured with the book. A fan of Oza? I am, she admitted. I wrote my master's thesis on his use of light in the Miro Foundation. A look of genuine delight spread across his face. The Maro is a masterpiece. It's practically a religious experience. For the next 20 minutes, they forgot who they were. The scorned wife, the corporate rival, and they became two people with a shared passion for architectural theory. He spoke with a captivating passion and intelligence. He wasn't just a developer building glass towers. He was a man who understood the soul of a building. Listen, he said as they stood by the door. This is going to sound forward, and please feel free to say no. I'm hosting a small dinner on Friday. Some friends, architects, artists, something low-key. I think you'd find it interesting. No ulterior motives, I promise. Just good conversation. Jessica hesitated. Every instinct, honed by years of Madrigal's manipulations, screamed at her to be suspicious. Why was he being so kind? But another quieter voice, the one that was tired of being afraid, urged her to say yes. She was lonely. She missed being around people who shared her passions. I'd like that, she said, surprising herself. The dinner was held at his loft in the Malasaña neighborhood, and stunning space filled with books, art, and warm reclaimed wood. It was the antithesis of Madrigal's penthouse, a home, not a showroom. The guests were warm, engaging, and happily oblivious to her connection to Madrigal Hale. For the first time in months, Jessica felt like herself again. Not the discarded wife, but Jessica Quintana, the art historian. She and Cassian talked for an uninterrupted hour. He told her about his beginnings, how he worked his way up from a small construction firm. His vision was always about creating spaces that served communities, not just clients. And he listened, truly listened, as she spoke of her abandoned career. The passion she still felt for it. You should be working in the field, he said, his expression serious. You have a brilliant eye. Have you ever considered art consulting for architectural firms, curating the spaces they build? I wouldn't even know where to begin, she confessed. You begin by building a portfolio, he said. Simply offer your services pro bono to a small firm on a notable project. Build your name. He paused. A friend of mine is leading a new community library project in the Lava PA's neighborhood. They have a very tight budget for acquisitions. They could use someone with your expertise to help them source affordable, meaningful pieces from local artists. It wasn't a handout. It was a door cracked slightly open. It was a sign of respect for her talent, something she hadn't felt in years. Tears pricked her eyes. Thank you, Cassian. That means a lot. Their relationship grew slowly, organically from that night on. They met for coffee to discuss the library project. He sent her articles about new exhibitions. She found herself looking forward to his messages, his quiet, steady presence. He never spoke ill of Madrigal. He never pried into the details of her divorce. His focus was always on her future. The library project became her lifeline. She threw herself into it, hunting through student exhibitions and small galleries, meeting with hungry young artists. She was good at it. She was negotiating deals, curating a collection, bringing a space to life. She was building something just as Madrigal was trying to tear her down. The slow change in her was palpable. The fear that had been her constant companion began to recede, replaced by a nent confidence. Her body was changing. The soft swelling of her pregnancy was now a visible, reassuring curve. She was creating life in more ways than one. The tipping point, Madrial, accustomed to hourly updates from his security team, watched this evolution with a growing sense of rage. He saw photos of Jessica, her face animated and happy, leaving the library site in lava paw. He saw her sharing a laugh with Cassie and Lobo over coffee. The narrative he had constructed in his mind, the pathetic shattered wife, was being rewritten before his very eyes. And he was not the author. His obsession, once a cold, calculated strategy, was becoming a hot, consuming fire. He saw Cassian not just as a business rival, but as a thief, stealing what was rightfully his. Not Jessica the woman, but the idea of her, the mother of his heir, a hale possession. To see her thriving without him, and worse with Lobo's help, was a personal, intolerable, narcissistic wound. He picked up his phone and dialed his head of security. "I want to know everything about her new life," he snarled, his voice a low growl. "Where does she go? Who does she see? Everything. And I want leverage on Lobo. Find it. I don't care what it costs." He had tried to erase her with indifference. Now he would erase her with his power. The game had changed. It was no longer about a quiet divorce. It was about total and utter destruction. Meanwhile, Madriel's life with Valeria was rapidly deteriorating. Her constant need for public validation grated on him. He would come home seeking a sanctuary and find her in the middle of a live stream pouting for her followers. One night, she confronted him. Her voice was shrill. "People are talking magical. They're posting photos of her with him. It's humiliating. Why haven't you crushed her yet? You promised you'd handle it." "I am handling it," he snapped, the pressure in his skull mounting. "It doesn't look like it," she shrieked. "It looks like she's winning, and you look weak." The word weak hit a raw nerve deep in his soul, the only place where his father's corrosive voice still echoed. He looked at Valeria, at her perfectly constructed face, and for the first time felt nothing but contempt. He had traded adiamond for a piece of glitter, and the glitter was starting to look cheap. He walked out, leaving her to babble into a cloud of expensive perfume. He drove aimlessly through the city, rage and confusion churning inside him. He ended up parked across the street from Jessica's modest apartment building. The lights were on in her window. He imagined her there, her life continuing, this new person growing within her, a life he had both created and discarded. Then he saw it. Cassie and Lobo's car pulled up. He got out holding a bag that looked like takeout. He rang the bell, was let in, and moments later, his silhouette appeared in her window next to hers. Madrial's hands clenched the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. It was no longer about strategy. It was no longer about business. It was something primal. He had to break them. He had to prove that he was the architect of their world. And if he couldn't build it, he would burn it to the ground. The motion for an emergency hearing was Madrial's full declaration of war. He was no longer trying to control the narrative. He was trying to scorch the earth. The legal filing was a masterpiece of character assassination filled with half-truths and vicious innuendo. It painted Jessica as a reckless, emotionally volatile woman, and Cassian as a predatory opportunist who was using her to get to Madriel. It requested that the court order a psychiatric evaluation for Jessica and grant Madriel exclusive temporary custody of the baby upon its birth. Sitting in Serena Cruz's office, Jessica read the document. Her hands were shaking. The words were a violation, a twisting of her reality into something ugly and unrecognizable. "He's using the baby as a hostage," Jessica said. Her voice trembled with a fury that burned away her tears. "This isn't about his concern for the child. This is about punishing me for not breaking." "It's a classic scorched earth tactic from a narcissist," Serena said, her face grim. "He can't stand that you're building a new life, particularly with Cassie and Lobo. We'll fight this. We'll document everything. Your work on the library project, your stable home, your prenatal appointments. We'll build a fortress of facts to withstand his fiction." The date for the hearing was it. The psychological toll was immense. Jessica felt as if she were living under a microscope. Every action scrutinized, every choice second-guessed. Sleep offered little escape. Her dreams filled with sterile courtrooms and Madriel's cold, triumphant smile. Cassian was her rock. When she called, her voice breaking as she told him about the court filing. He was at her flat within the hour. He didn't offer platitudes or false assurances. He sat with her, read the entire document, and his jaw tightened with a quiet, controlled rage. "He won't win this, Jessica," Cassian said, his voice a low, steady anchor in her storm. "My lawyers will coordinate with Serena. We'll provide all documentation to refute these lies. I won't let him do this to you." His steadfastness was a balm to her shattered nerves, but a seed of guilt took root in her heart. He's doing this because of you, Cassian. If I hadn't let you into my life? No. He cut her off gently but firmly, turning to look at her. His dark eyes were intense, serious. He's doing this because he's a bully who is terrified of losing control. He would have found another reason, another person to use as a weapon. This is who he is. The only thing that has changed is that you're not facing it alone. In that moment, the unspoken thing between them shifted. The slow burn-off friendship of mutual respect finally ignited. He reached out a hand, covering hers. It was the first time he had touched her with such deliberate tenderness. The warmth of his skin was a stark contrast to the memory of Madriel's icy touch. "I'm falling in love with you, Jessica," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I know the timing is a disaster. I know your life is a battlefield right now, but I can't pretend it's just friendship anymore." Tears streamed down Jessica's face, not from sadness, but from a deep, overwhelming relief. It felt like the first breath after being underwater for too long. "I think I'm falling in love with you too," she confessed. Their first kiss wasn't a desperate, passionate affair. It was soft, hesitant, a question, and an answer all at once. It was a promise of a future she hadn't dared to imagine. Do you think this new love between Jessica and Cassian can withstand Madrigal's fury? Share your predictions. The price paid Madriel, however, was spiraling. His obsession was consuming his life. He was distracted at work. His Midas touch faltered. He made a reckless, ill-advised bid at a major auction for a new telecom firm. A move driven by ego more than strategy, and lost millions. His board members began to whisper. The infallible magical Hale seemed volatile. His home life was a wasteland. Valeria, seeing her dreamed of life and Madrigal's attention slipping away, grew more desperate. She alternated between screaming accusations and pathetic attempts to rekindle their passion. She would wear lingerie that he had once found exciting, and he would look right through her, his mind miles away, parked on a street in Latina. "What does she have that I don't?" She shrieked at him one night after he'd spent an hour staring silently at his phone. A private investigator's photo of Jessica and Cassian leaving a restaurant on the screen. Nothing. Madrigal snapped, the lie tasting like ashes in his mouth. But it was a lie. Jessica had a quiet strength he had mistaken for weakness. She had a resilience he couldn't break. She had a core of integrity that made Valeria's desperate menations seem vulgar and cheap. Jessica had been real, and he had discarded her for this performance. Valeria's fear and jealousy turned into something poisonous. She saw Jessica not just as a rival for Madriel's affection, but as the wrecking ball of her carefully constructed future. If Madriel's empire crumbled, so would she. She had clawed her way up from an impoverished background. She hid from everyone, and she wasn't going back. She decided to take matters into her own hands. She found Jessica's address. One afternoon, she appeared on the doorstep of the Latina apartment, dressed in a stunningly expensive outfit, her face a mask of false concern. Jessica opened the door, her heart sinking. "Valeria, what do you want?" "I'm worried about you, Jessica," Valeria began, her voice dripping with artificial sympathy. "And I'm worried about Madriel. This war between you is destroying him." "This war was declared by him," Jessica said coldly, not inviting her in. "But you keep fighting," Valeria pressed, her eyes glittering. "You and Cassian Lobo. Do you have any idea what you're doing? You're making Madriel look weak. And that is the one thing he can't tolerate. He will ruin you. He will ruin Lobo. He will burn everything to the ground before he loses." "Is that a threat?" Valeria's facade cracked. A sneer twisted her perfect lips. "It's a fact. You think you're so righteous, don't you? The poor discarded wife. But you're not as innocent as you look. I know you were putting doubts in his mind about me long before I ever came along. I know you were playing the victim to make him feel guilty." Jessica looked at her baffled. "What are you talking about? I never did that." "Oh, please," Valeria sneered. "Don't play dumb. You think you can get him back? He doesn't want you. He's only doing this because his ego is bruised. Just leave him alone. Disappear, take the money and go. It's what's best for everyone, especially your baby." The confrontation was baffling. Valeria's accusations, nonsensical, but it was also revealing. Valeria wasn't a confident victor. She was terrified. She was standing on a trapdoor and she knew it. The exchange, however, had been observed. A man in a car parked across the street had filmed the whole thing on his phone. He was a private investigator, but he wasn't working for Madriel. He was working for Cassian. After the court filing, Cassian had with great reluctance hired a discreet firm to follow Valeria, suspecting she was more than a simple passive player in Madrigal's cruelty. He needed to protect Jessica from every angle. That night, Cassian watched the video. He saw Valeria's desperation. He heard her bizarre, unfounded accusations. Something didn't fit. On a hunch, he had the investigator do a deep dive, not just on Valeria Frio, the model, but on who she was before. What he found was the hidden motive, the secret that powered her entire existence. And it was the key that would unlock the prison Madrigal had built for himself and cause his carefully constructed world to come crashing down. The final showdown. The day of the custody hearing dawned gray and oppressive. The sky over Madrid was the color of a bruised slate. The courtroom was a cold wood-paneled box designed to intimidate and diminish. Jessica sat beside Serena Cruz, her back straight, her hands tightly clasped over her 6-month pregnant belly. Cassian sat 2 rows behind her, a silent, solid presence. Madrigal sat at the opposing table, flanked by a team of 3 lawyers. He looked impeccable in a sharp, dark suit, his face a stone mask. He refused to look at Jessica, his gaze fixed on the judge's empty bench. He radiated an aura of immense, unbreakable power. The hearing began, and Madrigal's lead counsel, a wise, silver-haired man named Leandro Tumbas, went on the attack. He painted a picture of Jessica's life as one of instability, citing her move to a less safe neighborhood and her unseemly relationship with a man known to have a vendetta against Mr. Hale. He was weaving a fiction of recklessness, and with every word, Jessica felt her reality slipping away. Then Serena Cruz stood to speak. "Your Honor," she began, her voice calm and clear, "we are not here today about my client's instability. We are here about Mr. Hale's obsession." Serena systematically dismantled his case. She presented Jessica's rental agreement, her prenatal records, glowing letters of recommendation from the library board. She presented a detailed report from a child psychologist who had evaluated Jessica and found her to be remarkably resilient and eminently prepared for motherhood. Then she played her trump card. "Your Honor, the petitioner claims my client's association with Mr. Cassie and Lobo is a source of instability. I would argue that it is Mr. Hale's reaction to this friendship. That is the real cause for concern." She turned to Madrigal's table. "Mr. Tumbas, is your client aware that his companion, Miss Valeria Frio, visited my client's home 2 days ago?" A flash of surprise in Madrigal's eyes. He shot a look at Valeria, who sat in the front row, suddenly pale. "And is he aware?" Serena continued, her voice rising. "That Miss Frio threatened my client. We have a sworn affidavit from a witness." Tumba objected, but the judge, her curiosity now fully engaged, allowed it. The atmosphere in this courtroom shifted. The first crack appeared in Madrigal's monolithic facade. But Cassian knew this wasn't enough. Madrigal could dismiss Valeria's actions as those of a jealous woman. Cassian had to detonate the truth. During a brief recess, he approached Serena and Jessica, his face grim. He held a thin file. "There's something you both need to see," he said. "It explains everything." He laid out his investigators' findings. Valeria Frio had been born Viraclov. Her father, a small-time contractor in Bilbao, had been driven into bankruptcy and despair a decade earlier after his company was deliberately crushed in a hostile acquisition. The man who orchestrated that takeover, who saw a small competitor and decided to snuff it out for sport, was a young, ruthlessly ambitious, magical Hale. Vera's father had taken his own life 6 months later. Jessica gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a long-term revenge plot. "She didn't meet Madrigal at a gala," Cassian explained, his voice low and urgent. "She targeted him. She studied him. She spent 2 years maneuvering her way into his orbit. She learned his weaknesses, his ego, his rivalry with me. She probably fed Himleys about you, Jessica, fanning the flames of his insecurity to push him into her arms. This was never love. It was revenge. She wanted to become his wife, secure her future, and then destroy him from within, just as he destroyed her family." The pieces fit with a nauseating clarity. Valeria's bizarre accusations, her desperation, her intimate knowledge of how to manipulate Madrigal's ego. Madrigal, returning to the courtroom, saw the 3 of them huddled together. He saw the file in Cassian's hand, and a cold dread, an emotion he hadn't felt since childhood, began to seep into his bones. When the hearing resumed, Serena Cruz requested permission to call a surprise witness to the stand. Valeria Frio. Panic flared in Valeria's eyes. She tried to refuse, but the judge, her curiosity, now fully engaged, compelled her. On the stand, under Serena's sharp questioning, Valeria's composure crumbled. The lies unraveled. When Serena presented a copy of her father's bankruptcy filing with magical signature on the takeover papers, Valeria completely broke. "He deserved it," she sobbed, the words pouring out of her, raw and laced with a decade of hatred. She looked directly at Madrigal, her face a mess of tears and streaked mascara. "He took everything from us. I was going to take everything from you, Madrigal. Your company, your name, your child. I was going to make you feel what it was like to have nothing." A collective gasp swept the courtroom. Every camera, every eye turned to Madrigal. His mask didn't just crack, it shattered. The revelation was a catastrophic blow. He looked at Valeria, this woman he had chosen, and saw not a prize, but a viper he had willingly led into his bed. He saw the last year of his life, not as a series of choices he'd made, but as a script written by the vengeful daughter of a man he barely remembered ruining. His betrayal of Jessica wasn't even his own idea. It was a symptom of his own vanity, expertly manipulated. The power he treasured, the control he wielded with such arrogance was an illusion. He had been a puppet. He looked at Jessica, truly looked at her for the first time in a year. He saw the woman he had loved, the quiet strength he had misjudged, the life they were supposed to have. He saw the swell of her belly, holding a child born of a love he had murdered. And he saw her sitting next to Cassian Lobo, a man who'd shown her the respect and kindness of which he had been incapable. The judge's voice was a distant hum. The lawyer's words were meaningless noise. The entire foundation of Madrigal's identity, the master of the universe, the man in control, had been pulverized. He had lost everything. Not his money, not his company. But the one thing he now realized was priceless. A genuine human connection. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He didn't say a word. He simply turned and walked out of the courtroom, his shoulders for the first time in his life hunched in defeat. He pushed his way through the crowd of reporters, his face a ghostly white. He had walked into the courtroom a king demanding his property. He walked out a hollowed-out man haunted by the ruins of a life he himself, and so foolishly, had destroyed. The moment of truth had come not from a rival or a market crash, but from the ghosts of his own cruelty. A new life. The fallout from the hearing was a silent implosion. The case was dismissed. Madrigal's petitions withdrawn with a terse online email from a junior lawyer at his firm. Thestry, however, exploded. The tale of the cold millionaire, his vengeful mistress, and the resilient wife became the talk of Madrid. But for once, the narrative centered not on Madrigal's power or Valeria's deception, but on Jessica's quiet dignity. Madrigal disappeared from public view. He retreated to his silent penthouse. But the silence was different now. It was no longer a symbol of his control, but a reflection of his emptiness. Valeria was gone. Her name and face vanished as quickly as they had appeared, leaving only the wreckage of her long-simmering revenge. Madrigal was left alone with the wreckage of his life. He didn't fight the divorce. The papers were signed without objection. He gave everything Jessica and Serena asked for. Full legal and physical custody of the baby to Jessica, a generous and unconditional child support trust, and the formal transfer of a significant portion of his liquid assets to her. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a penance. 3 months later, Jessica gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Phoenix, but nicknamed him Nix. He had her warm brown eyes and a stubborn tuft of dark hair. Holding him in her arms in the quiet hospital room, Jessica felt a sense of peace so profound it felt sacred. The war was over. Her new life had begun. Cassian was there. He had been there for the last few months of her pregnancy, a quiet, steady source of strength and love. He held Nix with a tenderness that made Jessica's heart ache with a fierce, protective joy. Their love story hadn't been forged in ballrooms and candlelit dinners, but in the trenches of a bitter legal war and the shared project of rebuilding a life. It was stronger for it. 6 months after Nix's birth, Jessica received an unexpected email. It was from Madrigal. It was short, stripped of its usual corporate jargon, and shockingly direct. Jessica, I know there are no words that can undo the damage I have done. I was a fool, blinded by an arrogance I mistook for strength. I betrayed you and I betrayed our son before he was born. I expect nothing from you, not forgiveness, not a second chance. But I would like to be a father to Nix. Not a provider, not a name on a trust, but a father. I have started therapy. I am trying to understand the man I became and to become a better one. If you are ever willing to allow it, I would like to meet him. The terms would be entirely yours. Madrigal. Jessica read the email several times. The old Magical would have sent a demand through his lawyers. This message was different. It was stripped of ego. It was the sound of a man who had finally hit rock bottom and was beginning the slow, painful climb back. She talked it over with Cassian. His response was, as always, measured and supportive. Nix deserves a father, he said. If Madrigal is truly willing to do the work to be a good one, that's a gift to your son. But the choice is yours, Jessica. You are in control now. She agreed to a meeting at a public park on a cool autumn afternoon. Madrigal looked different. He had lost weight. The arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by a hesitant uncertainty. He didn't try to touch Nix at first. He just looked at him, his eyes filled with a universe of regret. That was the beginning of Madrigal's redemption. It wasn't a grand cinematic arc. It was a slow, painful, and private process. It was awkward, supervised park visits. It was him learning how to hold his son, how to change a diaper, how to exist in a room without trying to dominate it. Hess sold the penthouse, moved to a smaller, more human-sailed apartment. He stepped down as CEO of Hale Holdings, taking on a less public board role. He was dismantling the monument he had built to his own ego, stone by stone. He never got Jessica back. He never tried. He saw the easy, genuine love between her and Cassian. He saw the stable, happy home they were building for Nyx. He understood with a clarity that was both painful and liberating that he had forfeited his right to that life. His redemption wasn't about reclaiming what he had lost, but about honoring it from a distance. It was about becoming a man worthy of being Nyx's father. 2 years later, Jessica, Cassian, and a giggling, babbling Nyx were feeding ducks at the pond in Rero Park. It was a perfect Sunday. Jessica, now a sought-after art consultant with her own successful small firm, felt a sense of contentment so profound it felt sacred. Across the pond, partially hidden by a weeping willow, Madrigal watched them. He wasn't spying. He was simply observing. He saw his son, happy and loved. He saw the woman he had discarded, radiant and thriving. A sharp pang of his colossal loss hit him as it always did. But this time it was followed by something else. A quiet sense of gratitude. Gratitude that they were well. Gratitude that despite his best efforts to destroy her, this beautiful life existed. He gave a small, sad, accepting smile. He had been a cold millionaire who had lost everything. But in losing, he had found a flicker of his humanity. It wasn't the ending he would have chosen, but it was the one he had earned. He turned and walked away. Not a titan of industry, but just a man who finally understood the true measure of wealth. And so, Madrigal Hale learned the hardest lesson of all. You cannot put a price on a human heart. Jessica's journey from the depths of betrayal to a life filled with authentic love and purpose is a powerful reminder that our greatest strength is often forged in our deepest pain. This wasn't just a story about a rich man's fall. It was about a woman's incredible rise. It shows that true power is not about control or wealth, but about resilience, forgiveness, and the courage to build a new life from the ashes of the old.